welcome to another edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter. I am standing in my kitchen, watching my son, so there's going to be a lot of background noise, and Bingo was his name-o and the like. Pay no attention. Tonight, we have a co-production with the Convalescent Flaneur podcast, with Anna Troxell, of Creepoid, of Lovelorn, and her new hardcore band Mugger. I'm not sure who interviewed whom in this. It kind of just happened, and it was glorious and organic and simple. And I hope you all enjoy it as much as I certainly did. So without further ado, I give to you Anna Troxell on the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast.
Hi, y'all. Welcome to another episode of the Convalescent Flaneur with your host, me, Anna Troxell. Today, I'm joined by a fellow podcaster, very exciting, Peter Tansky, who hosts the Book of Very, Very Bad Things. What's up, Peter? Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is pretty exciting.
I know. It's so cool to have another podcaster on. It's like two card sharks playing poker. They're like, I had a podcaster on last week, my label mate Josh, who does Spinning Out Pod, and it was funny. We both like sort of ended naturally, and he was like, so I guess that's a good place to wrap up. He's like, oh wait, that's your job. I was like, no, it's perfect. All right, y'all. So this podcast is about recovery. So we start every episode with our guest sort of just leaping us off into what that means to them and how they define it in their life.
Okay. Well, I would say that how I would construe recovery for me, I had gotten clean from opioid addiction in a traditional 12-step program, meaning I didn't go to NA. I attended AA meetings, the strictures of which can be quite brutal as far as the rigorous honesty is concerned, and as far as the way you're monitored by the others in AA, as they are a lot tougher on you than they would be in the normal Narcotics Anonymous type setting, as much as I've seen of it anyway. So there wasn't a whole lot of hugs and kisses. It was very rigorous, very brutally honest, and it was what I'd needed. It's what I still hearken back to whenever there's that inkling of backsliding. I think of, some of them were World War II veterans,
right?
Calling me some very, very vulgar names in order to kind of keep me in check. And that's what worked for me. And as far as how that works out in my daily life, part of it is a paternal fear of some of them are no longer with us, but I think I carry those gentlemen as sort of like my guardian angels, even though they were pretty rough. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? And having been raised by a Vietnam veteran who was also a drill instructor, that resonated with me.
Yeah, that I really relate to that too, because I in my like path of trying to figure out how I'm going to get better, the first serious thing I did was to join an outpatient program for eating disorders, in which I had to go once a day for like 3 hours and eat a one meal with them. And bless their hearts, that program just did not work for me because it was very touchy-feely. It was very like, well, you're supposed to eat this, but eat what you can, try your best. You know what I mean? And it was like, it just wasn't right for me at the time, because I needed someone to be like, no, you fucking have to do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I just was going to get away with whatever I could get away with until if I was in a situation where it was lax like that, and once I got into an inpatient program where the door locked behind me and it was like, they were like, you don't eat, you don't get to use the phone tonight. You don't eat, you don't leave the unit. You don't see the sun today. You don't eat, you don't get to go to, you know what I mean? And like, that works for me. Like, like you're saying, maybe other programs work for other people in different ways. But for me, I needed someone to be very strict and say there's an accountability to your actions. And you can choose to keep starving yourself, but you can't do it here. You know what I mean? And that worked for me. Like I liked having that, like that there's a consequence to this choice now in a real meaningful way and not just like in my mind, you know?
And what I find very very similar to the opioid addict is I had grown up with a sister with an eating disorder as well. Um, it's the same level of guile. A lot
Mhm.
of cover stories, a lot of lying, a lot of
Oh, yeah.
living this sort of double life where you have these scripts almost that are kind of built in order to skirt around your
Of course.
what you're trying to get away with. And
Mhm.
are you fooling anyone? Really? No, but you certainly think you're the best and most adept card shark on planet Earth when it comes to that.
Yes, absolutely. Like I think that, you know, I was I was working very, very, very diligently to fool everyone in my life that I didn't have an eating disorder, but I think I was working the hardest to fool myself
Mm,
that I didn't have an eating disorder. You know what I mean? Like, because I just kept being like, "Oh, you're good, you're all right," and there's such a comparison within addiction of all sorts where you kind of compare yourself to everyone else that you see who has a problem. Well, I'm not as bad as them.
yeah.
Like I'm not that bad. You know what I mean? And so I think like I just kept playing these tricks, and it wasn't only just to fool other people into thinking I was eating. Sometimes I was trying to trick myself into thinking I was eating. And I would find food that I had hid from myself. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and I'd be like, oh, fuck. And that's like another level of the game where you're like, I thought I ate that, like, I'm like, oh, I didn't eat that. You know what I mean? And that was like the continuation of things like that that just became so scary and surreal. It started to get like so like we talk about on my podcast a lot this myth about eating disorders being about control.
Mhm.
And a lot of people thinking, like, oh, yeah, you couldn't control your life. So you control how much you ate. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds like really great on paper, I guess. I don't know. But like to me, I never for 1 second felt in control.
Yeah.
Like I felt completely out of control all the time.
How does that look on tour? I mean, I know how being a substance abuser works on tour
Mhm.
because it's even in the confines of the mostly straight edge hardcore scene, there was always a
Mhm.
subset of punks who were users and abusers, and I always had a group of comrades involved in the
Mhm.
same thing I was into. How does that
Yeah.
look on tour? Because that's I guess like being in an independent band, yeah, going hungry is kind of part of it, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I think people are going to
What we
catch
talk
on, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was not actively sick when I was touring,
Okay.
thank God. So I was the most sick, really anorexic between like 2003 and 2006. So this is the year after I graduate college up into going to grad school, right? So this happens like well before I didn't pick up a bass until I was 29 years old.
Oh wow.
Like so music came like later for me in life, and music was something that my husband encouraged me to do because he wanted a bass player.
Yeah.
Like he was like, oh, I want to start a band. I need a bass player. Like you can play bass. And I was like, I don't know. I'll try. But it was interesting the ways that it would come up even before we started touring. Just feeling like I had a physical body and being reminded about having a body by having to perform on stage, and also having people take photographs of you
Yeah.
and you can't control them, and you and like, oh, okay, that's what I look like. So this is like a good deal of time after I've left the hospital, but I'm still coming to terms with the realities of being a human and having a body with needs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like touring, once we started touring full time, it became very clear very quickly I have to kind of go back in time to when I was first getting out of the hospital and being very strict about setting up. I need to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I need to, there's like, it goes back to just being medicine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's difficult to do on tour because like you don't have access to food, like good, healthy food all the time,
Oh
and
yeah.
like my husband is in the band with me. So he's like going into like protector mode. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we need to go to Whole Foods. And everyone else in the band is like, okay. And he's like, and he's like, we're buying all this food so that we always have like backups. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And like I definitely have not always behaved my best on tour, like because it's stressful,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
Yeah, you know how it is. Like it's hard to like wanna eat like a good healthy meal when like the van broke down and like your show sucked and like your gear's not working and you lost your voice or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so all the natural reasons that people go into like I don't feel like eating mode, I know will amplify for me 1,000. You know, so it's I'm sure the same for like drug and alcohol addiction. Like those same stressors kick up our compulsive behavior tendencies,
Yeah.
you know, and we have to watch for that.
I think especially when it comes to anything emotionally jarring, even in the slightest, because, I in my formative years, instead of learning important coping mechanisms, I
Mhm.
instead learned how to raid my father's pharmacopoeia. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Like I was one of the fortunate slash misfortunate ones who had access to Quaaludes when, they had already been gone for years, but my father had like a cache of them.
Yeah.
And I discovered the joys of them rather quickly. So
Yeah.
instead of dealing with regret, heartbreak, shame, and everything else that's built into a punk rocker in 1988, I found Quaaludes.
Yeah.
You know,
And they worked for a while, I bet, you
they
know,
they
very effectively.
they worked until I couldn't find anything else to replace them with that looked similar enough that he wouldn't notice because he wasn't taking them.
Totally. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I think like I definitely did not learn coping mechanisms for until post eating disorder. But even before for me what fucked me up for so long was that the reason I delayed getting help, amongst other, reasons about access to healthcare in this country,
Yeah.
but what primarily was me thinking I can't have an eating disorder because I don't really fundamentally care about my body.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Just in the same way a drug user isn't just like, I love drugs. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, it's just like I grew up in a household that didn't talk about bodies or what my parents weren't like you need to like my mom never uttered the phrase like watch what you eat to me, never made me feel like I needed to be careful about my body as if that was a standard for who I was. So I kept thinking like because I would look around to my other girlfriends growing up who had been that way, who had been like, oh, we have to watch what we eat, and I'd always be like, why? You know what I mean? Like in high school I was like dumb. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so when I became anorexic, it was just so beguiling to me because I was like, there's never a thinness that's going to be enough. That's the thing I'm chasing is the feeling of perfection.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And like, so, after many, many decades of therapy, now I'm able to realize that's what I was chasing, the feeling of perfection. And when I look back in my childhood, that's what I see, always needing to be perfect, needing to be like the best at everything,
Mm.
academically, like for my mom, the best kid. I don't cause trouble. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, that's when I'm like, oh, that was the high. Like the being so perfect, you didn't have any need. You didn't even have basic human needs like hunger.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that I don't know if your classic cisgendered male knows that sort of pressure. I just don't think we do. Maybe some do.
Mhm.
It's not something. It's not a standard I was ever made to live up to per se.
Mhm.
Like body image.
Mhm.
I was always skinny,
Right.
but I didn't care. I didn't want to be like Schwarzenegger either. It just wasn't.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it wasn't a part of my cultural zeitgeist. Whereas I
Mhm.
think women are really saddled with this in a really negative, really like seething way that ingrains self-hatred.
For
That's
sure, yeah.
why I think it's kind of I think it's interesting that there were so many women I'd known throughout my life who did suffer with this very
Mhm.
silently.
Mhm.
And you didn't hear about getting help about it. It just sort of
For
was.
sure.
It just sort of was.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I think about, like, ultimately, I'm grateful that I didn't have an eating disorder during the era of social media because, yes, there might have been outlets in which I've discovered voices that were saying, "This is fucked up. This is wrong. Like, here's my story." But I think overwhelmingly you see images of perfect unattainable bodies, and even like just looking at last week, Kim Kardashian goes to the Met Gala in Marilyn Monroe's dress. Great.
Mhm.
She could have just said, I worked really hard on my body to fit in this dress. That would have already been a little like, okay,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But instead, she takes it even further and she talks specifically about starving herself, about sitting in saunas for hours on end just to fit in a dress for a party. And it just blows my mind that like somebody would use their huge platform to spread specific tips about starvation,
Yeah.
and nobody bats an eye and nobody's like horrified that, you know what I mean? Like, what? Like, that is insane. And like, to even be in an era where people, the Gen Zers love, I don't want to hate on the youth, I really don't, but like, they really want to hang up these like, we're body positive and we're body inclusive. And there's certainly more wiggle room, but it's not like this playground of like everyone's welcome. There's still like these very specific ideas about what is beautiful and what is accepted and what is like the perfect,
Right.
and I just wish that that could be quiet for a while,
Well, yeah.
like that people could have some breath where they are allowed to like not have to think about the ways their body communicates who they are to the world, because I'm sure that the people in your life that you knew who had at the very least disordered eating was getting a lot of like disordered feedback
Yeah.
about their body, because certainly in the beginning I was getting, you look amazing,
Yeah.
you look great, like, and when I moved to New York City at the height of my illness, it was even crazier because I was in a world suddenly where I was walking down the street with models and actresses who looked like I did,
Mhm.
who looked incredibly painfully thin. And I thought, well, I just fit in. And I think that's a parallel between, the music industry as well. And certainly living here in Austin, Austin is like the playground USA for America for adults. There's a drinking culture here that I have not experienced in my adult life. And I lived in Savannah, Georgia, where people get fucked up
Oh,
in
yeah.
Savannah.
Yeah.
But I feel like here it's almost like this badge of honor. Like we go out every night and we party every night and we're the music capital of the world. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Like I want, but I'm like, we don't need to like live up to this standard, where it's like always around, we're always doing this. It's always like the most, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think that there's like that parallel between the two worlds of like having to participate on this high level.
And I think what that is speaking to though is like, yes, they're doing things very large. Like, yeah, we do this the most. We do this to the nth level, but it's all toxic.
Yeah,
And,
for sure.
and it like just like with Kim Kardashian squeezing into Marilyn's dress, which Marilyn was she was not like a rail thin girl by any stretch of the imagination, but like what she's espousing is an ingrained toxicity that is kind of a holdover from a generation that's before hers, and she's just
Right.
kind of perpetuating it. And we're supposed to be in this generation of gender biases being completely melted away, people getting to self-actualize their own sexualities no matter what that might look like, and that's wonderful, but there's still that kernel of toxicity
For sure.
that just kind of comes into fruition, and it never seems to go away. It just kind of ebbs and flows, and I'll never understand how anyone could truly champion that with any sense of pride. Like, oh, we do this, I do more coke than anybody. Like,
Yeah.
good for you. How's
Yeah.
your nasal cavity doing?
Yeah. I'm always like, I try not to judge and like, whatever y'all want to do. But as somebody who's been through an addiction that forced me into recovery, that's forced me to really like look at and examine my behavior, I feel like it's very clear to me when somebody is needing me to participate on the same level that it's really about them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay, you need like you need me to drink more with you because it's normalizing your behavior that's probably problematic to you, you know? And like, I always tell people who reach out to me asking like, hey, like, I'm not sure if I have an eating disorder, but I'm having X, Y, and Z behaviors. And I say, like, if you've Googled, am I anorexic? You probably are anorexic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's probably a thing. And I think that echoes amongst lots of addictive behaviors, because people that have a firm grasp on, I want to go on a diet and lose a couple pounds, and then that's the end of it. That's different than this. I need to eat with chopsticks for some reason.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, yeah, I've been there, girl. Like, like anything to make it harder to eat, anything to disrupt eating, anything to get in the way of getting food in the body. Like, that's different than a diet, but like, certainly diet culture like echoes it back and feeds it back, like when I was first getting sick, I was picking up US Weekly and looking for dieting tips from Lindsay Lohan. And you know what I mean? Like, I was like, okay, yeah, eat less. Okay. Like, those are the tips, y'all. Like, that's what I learned in like 2003. It was like, don't eat as much. I was like, okay, got it.
Yeah, ingest less. There's your move. Not like nothing to do with a healthy regimen of any sort.
No,
of course not. Why would you have that? Yeah.
Yeah, like that's what fucked me up, man. Really, for real. Because like, I did not know what a calorie was. When I decided to go on a diet, I did not know how to do it. I had no frame of reference for it, other than like my mom like doing like 80s workout videos when I was a kid, what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
and then, like in the leotards, and like, what was the Tony guy? You can do it.
Oh
or,
yeah. God, what is that guy's name? He had the most beautiful blonde mullet. It was exquisite.
Yes, he did. So I would watch that. Then, you know what I mean? There was definitely like, like women work out, but men don't, or something, you know what I mean? And like, my mom wasn't someone who dieted, but I watched my other friends' moms who would diet, and I didn't see their dads participating in that same behavior. You know what I mean? And like, my mom, my aunt, every time we would eat dinner with her, she would eat on like a child's plate. You know what I mean? Like, everyone else had like a normal plate. And I remember seeing like she had a small plate. I remember thinking, like, what the fuck is that about? You know what I mean? Like, even as a kid being like, that's weird, right? So like, here's me, like a 21-year-old adult who's never like wanted to diet or tried to diet, is suddenly feeling like extreme dissatisfaction in their life, is deciding to diet. Like, that is a crazy choice. Like, that is a crazy like leap. Like, I'm feeling lonely and scared and fearful, to I'm going to fix this by fixing my body. And I think that you're right. Like, that at that time, in that moment, that was a really like gendered decision.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I can be good again if I'm beautiful again. And this is how I'm going to get to feel good and safe and calm, through my body.
Yeah. And my own experience with that via my sister, who I'm not going to say her name. I'm outing you, but I'm not going to say her name, girl. I think the reason why she found her way to that, and then later to the same habits I had, were because my father was very, very bipolar. He combat veteran, PTSD, alcoholic, you name it, he had it. And he used food as affection. That was his way of making up for all of the fucked up shit he'd put us through. He had it all going on, but he was a great cook. That was the one thing he had going. So, and he passed that on to me, but he used food as affection. That was his gateway into our good graces again. All six of us, like, okay, dad just wrecked the house. Now he's going to make, homemade pizza or whatever he's going to make. And I think that was my sister's way to kind of revolt against his affection, almost, which is kind of I don't want to say a darker impetus to it, but it's definitely an interesting one as well. I think there's a million reasons for people to go down those paths, though.
Right. For sure. I think like there's not one thing. There's like a gazillion reasons that we all like, that it all happens at this perfect moment for whatever, for you to be in the cabinet looking for pills, you know what I mean? For your sister to be like pushing the food away as a fuck you can't fix this.
Yeah.
Through that, you know what I mean? And like, certainly that came up for me with like being an Italian,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And like food is love, you know, we weren't a household that cared about bodies, but we were a household that cared about food for sure.
Yeah.
And I had like two different dichotomy like perspectives in my life. It was my Slovak mom's side where we don't have any money, we can't afford food, we have to eat the cheapest food possible, even though that wasn't real. That was like a myth. My mom was pretending kind of was the thing.
Yeah.
But my dad's side, we're Italian, food is plentiful, there's always enough, there's more than enough. You know what I mean? Like there's so many like diversity, like it's this. We never have one thing for dinner when my dad cooks.
Yeah.
It's steak, it's lobster, it's sushi, it's pasta, all in the same meal.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, so having these really like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. And like my grandmother was the youngest of 14, lived through the Depression. So for her, food was like all tied up in love and survival. You know what I mean? Like she was always prepared for like the next. She would have been great in COVID because her whole house was like stocked to the nines with every possible thing you can imagine. But that was fucked up as a kid, like pulling open drawers and finding boxes of macaroni that are expired, like in dust and crumbling and rotten. So it's like always finding like rotten food in my grandmother's house. And then later as an anorexic, finding rotten food that I thought I had eaten, that I had hidden, was like a weird parallel. I'm like, oh my God, I'm turning into my grandma. You know, like, but also, I think even more importantly, one of the things that I've kind of uncovered, like a word you used was reward. And like I've uncovered like that there was this sickness reward thing that happened. Like we weren't a family that like went to the store and got stuff just for no reason. You know what I mean? Like, but when we were sick, you got treated really well. And like you got like prizes, almost like you had won like some contest, you know, like I remember when my brother had an asthma attack at 3 years old, we went to Toys R Us and got every Batman they had on the shelf.
Oh, wow.
Because that was his favorite. And like that never happened. Like we would never get like a toy for no reason. And like when I got bit by a dog at 5, I got every My Little Pony I wanted. And so like I think like I figured out like, oh, you get attention when you're sick. And that's the time when it's suddenly okay to ask for help.
So it's almost like Munchausen's.
For sure. Yeah. Like, you know, only like I don't know how to tell you, mom, friends, family, boyfriend, I'm not feeling good and I need help. I don't know how to do that. So I'm going to make myself sick because that's when you're allowed to ask for help. Mm-hmm. You know, like I think that was part of it, amongst, like you're saying, a million other reasons. That was part of it. But like the fucked up thing was, for the first time, the sickness didn't work. Like it didn't work because I lost weight and people liked it. And it was like, great job. You know, I was like, no, I'm sick. You know?
Wow. What an, if let's say that were me, okay, as a man in that time period, I lose all that weight. Everyone's going to converge upon me and be like, okay, listen, man, we know you're up to something. We know you're up to something. A woman does it and there's praise.
For sure. Yeah.
You know, you're 27 pounds underweight. You look great.
I wish that there had been a little bit of not only just my like people giving me external praise about my body. It's also medical professionals that are telling me there's nothing wrong. There's no reason to be concerned. You know what I mean? Like that's like what really like freaks me out even to this day when I think about people that are suffering, because I wonder like, is there any difference now in training, awareness, learning to spot the signs of eating disorders? Because I had every single one of them. Yeah. I had every physical sign, because not only am I losing weight, right, but I'm like growing like fur on my body. Like I'm growing fur on my cheeks, on my arms, on my legs. It's a way that your body goes, oh shit, like you're so thin that you can't regulate your body temperature anymore. Mm-hmm. We have to do this to do it, right? My period stopped for 5 years. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it just stopped. And the gynecologist was like, oh, that happens. Like, you know what I mean? Like not at all concerned. There was not one iota of worry in his eyes when I told him that. He's like, you're good. He's like, that happens to young women. And I was like, okay,
really?
Seems weird. You know what I mean? But like, what do I know? I don't know.
But the second you go beyond that magical BMI point where they consider you overweight, and which is ridiculous. Let's face facts.
Yeah, BMI is
It's
bullshit.
bullshit.
Yeah.
But I mean, mine's pretty bad right now. But COVID, and I'm old as fuck, so I put on weight. But you know what I mean? Like if a woman goes a little bit above that, then they hit the fucking panic button. Like, oh, you could get diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yes.
I,
Yeah. It's
but that's when you hit the panic button. I think that's kind of
yes.
ridiculous.
Right. Over is what cause for alarm. Severely under is fine. And I was like, I don't know, y'all. I don't feel good. Because even when I was sick, I could, and I didn't say I have an eating disorder. I could say I don't feel good.
Mhm.
Like that was something, again, like tied into sickness and allowed to not feel well physically, not being allowed to not feel well emotionally, but allowed to not feel well physically. And so I would say, like, I don't feel well. I have constant pain. And the doctors were like, you're good. You probably have, they told me, a pinched nerve, an ulcer. I mean, I was going to the doctor a lot when I was at my worst weight, and like nobody said anything, not a nurse. Like, you would think somebody in the medical professional field would have been able to say, how are you doing emotionally? Like, maybe just someone could have picked up on the fact that I had lost 50 pounds in 6 months. You know what I mean? Like a huge amount of weight. And everyone's like, you're good. Like, it just blows my mind to this day,
And I think there's just maybe a little bit of a sea change in the medical community, because now certain things happen to you. You go to the doctor and they ask, are you being harmed at home? I think things are slightly changing, at least here. But
yeah,
I want to know why that wasn't in place 20 years ago.
right. It's not that long ago. You know what I mean? Like, it's really not that long. Like, people know what eating disorders were, like, but I think there was just a lot of like, mythology around it, and misinformation, and even with someone who had an eating disorder, but you know what I mean, like, was struggling to qualify as somebody who had one, because I thought, oh, like, I have to be doing X, Y, and Z behaviors to really qualify. And the fact that I was only starving myself wasn't enough. You know what I mean? Like, I thought, oh, like, I'm not going to the gym all day, every day. I'm not binging and purging. I'm not doing that. So that means that I'm not really sick, like, and so it's like, it goes to, again, the depths of deception you're even doing to yourself.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm only using, in the morning.
Exactly.
I just shoot up in the morning. Everything else is beautiful.
Yeah. That bargaining with yourself, you know what I mean? Like, and even when I knew for sure, like, okay, this is problematic, but I also, like, I think I got a handle on it. Like, there was a period in my addiction that I just thought, this is not great, but I think I've figured out how to eat just enough that I get through the day. I don't collapse. I don't faint out of nowhere. I'm able to, like, be alert and present and have conversations with people, but I'm still losing weight. So I've, like, found the magic formula. And I think that a lot of people I've talked to with alcohol or drugs, they're like, yeah, I figured out, like, how to, like, keep a job, or kind of, you know what I mean? Enough for long enough that or like maintain a relationship, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, again, like all these, like, ish, you know what I mean? But it's like, in retrospect, looking back, it was not a life at all. There was no happiness. There was no pleasure. There was no joy. It was just constantly being chained to this voice that said, this is what the day is going to look like.
Well, it's maintenance.
You know what I mean?
It's actual maintenance, and it's a
yes.
horrifying maintenance, because your only real relationship is one with that which is destroying you.
Right.
And you're keeping that alive. You're feeding that fire. So that ghost, that demon, that saprophytic organism that's sucking the life out of you, is the only thing you're showing any love or attention. Everything else around you sort of melts away, disappears, and you end up becoming solitary in a way that most people wouldn't truly understand, which is kind of frightening.
for sure.
Even when you come out of it, if you maintained any relationships of any depth, they're tenuous at best for a very long time because they're lined with a great deal of mistrust.
For sure.
I
Yeah.
find, and God, when I'd first gotten sober, I think the first 3 years I had to make myself eat, because when you're on
Mm-hmm.
opioids, food's the enemy too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because if you eat too much, especially if you're eating pills and not shooting up, that's going to cut into your high.
Right.
So you starve yourself. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm getting oxys later. If I eat this now, I'm gonna fuck my high up. So I'm not going to eat this right now.
Right.
And
For sure.
I don't know if it qualifies as an eating disorder, but it's certainly disorderly.
Right.
You
It's disordered eating for
Mhm.
sure, and I find there's so many parallel, like beyond just like the background. Yeah, there was this fear, whatever, that caused the compulsive behavior that I think parallels a lot of addictive behavior. There's real physical like commonalities as well, and like avoidance of food, and or it just being like not high on the scale of hierarchy of needs, it being kind of get pushed down to like not important. And even when I was in inpatient, the program that I got into eventually was research based. So they were doing research on eating disorder folks, affective behavior folks, and addicted behavior folks. So people that were coming out of addiction. And they had us eat with the addiction people because we were on the same meal plan.
Yeah.
We were on these like huge, like super high calorie meal plans. And it was funny, like they were kind of like stoked on it. And like we were sitting there like scowling, like, and they were like milk and like,
Yeah.
like,
Well, especially if there's any sugars, because
yes, yes,
your
yeah.
your pleasure receptors are looking for any goddamn thing. So sugar and caffeine, to any addict, really, it's like, oh yeah, I'll
Yeah.
have more. Give me 8 candy bars. And me, it
Yeah.
was sweet tarts, and that screwed my teeth up in a beautiful way.
Oh, nice.
So I'm just chomping on sweet tarts.
Sweet and tart. Oh, for sure. Yeah. It actually made me feel good to eat with them, because at least it showed me like somebody enjoying food and feeling good around food was like nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was better than just being with the eating disorder folks that were like, it was just such a, you know what I mean? Like a misery.
Mhm.
And like I had always been somebody that liked and enjoyed food. So it when I got to eat in the hospital, I felt like I was supposed to put on this act of like, this is horrible. But like I was happy. I was relieved. I was very relieved to be eating again and to eating foods that I hadn't allowed myself to even think about in years. There's a pleasure there. Like I don't know what other people go through, but I know what I went through was intense relief to finally be allowed to eat again.
Mhm.
And even with my therapist, it took me a while to even admit it to him, because I thought I'm supposed to be acting like this is torturous. I'm supposed to be like, I hate this. But like I love it. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? And like again, for me, like being in a place where I had to eat, where there was structured and there was rules, that made it okay and made me feel like I could do it. In the hospital, I kept thinking like, am I gonna do this when I leave? I'm not sure. We'll see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there was a big, because I was there for 2.5 months. So I would say in the beginning, I was sort of like, I'll go along with this and I'll do this while I'm here, and we'll see what happens when I get out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was hard to imagine doing it on the outside when I could just do whatever I wanted. But then once I gained the weight, I was like, oh my God, can you imagine having to like go through this all over again? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the looking back and being like, "Ah, I know I could do it if I wanted to, but do I want to?" Because like it took it took everything to get back, like,
Yeah.
and like it strained everything. It strained my relationships with people. It strained money for me. People always think like that money's not a factor with eating disorders. I can't tell you the amount of thousands of dollars of groceries that I threw out,
Yeah.
that I bought in a store but never made it into my house because I just freaked out and panicked and threw it away in a dumpster. You know what I mean? Like, so there was like all kinds of shit that would, like, when I think about having to do that again, it just feels so exhausting. Like I'm like, I don't
That's
know, y'all.
wow. I mean, like, and I thought I was being kind of basic when, like, my moment of clarity after having gotten clean, my clean clarity was like, wow, I can use the bathroom now.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
that was the point where I was like, okay, I'm not going to go do this again. But
Yeah. Like this is a place where I just go to the bathroom.
yeah, so wow, I could just use the bathroom.
Yep.
This is absolutely amazing.
Yes, absolutely. Like just being able to like tolerate not like somebody asked me recently, like, oh, like who had also had some disordered eating habits in their past. So they kind of knew some of the things we go through. And they asked me, when you go out to eat, what's it like when you go out to eat now? And I was like, not, great. It's not like I just go in like easy breezy, beautiful girl. Like, it's not like that. But I can just eat it where we both knew what we were talking about, where that uncertainty, when you're anorexic, you need to know every single calorie that goes into your food.
Yeah.
So going out to eat is torturous because you can't be in the kitchen with the chef watching them measure out butter or olive oil or all the extra shit that makes food taste good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That like when you're anorexic, all that shit goes away. There's none of that. It's just the thing, So like eating out, I would just not eat all day just to tolerate eating out and then not eat the thing I'm supposed to be eating when I go to eat out because it's too scary. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just like this whole like, I planned this for nothing, but it was interesting to have that conversation and be like, what I'm talking about. Right. I'm like, I know what you're talking about. And no, that isn't something that's on my radar at all. I don't think about that at all, like, and even when I cook at home, I don't count calories. I don't go like, oh, and let me measure this shit out. Like that would be a terrible idea for me. You know what I mean? Like I don't like, like that would be awful. Like, so I don't even like, even when I cook and I'm supposed to do that, like if I'm following a recipe, I just kind of eyeball it. I'm like, that's good. Because I know what's going to be triggering for me,
Yeah.
It's the same way I'm sure you do that in your life too. Just avoid things that are going to be problematic.
Mostly with me, it's avoiding people, and there are
Mhm.
family members. There are
Mm.
once very close friends who will still creep up. I mean, I had someone try to get in touch with me a few weeks ago, and I had to just not answer the call. I had to just
Mhm.
pretend it didn't happen. And as horrible as that may
Mhm.
sound, this person is so intrinsically tied to the toxicity and obsession of my
Mhm.
own addictions that I couldn't possibly broach that. I can't talk to
Mhm.
this person. I can't look at this person because I
Mhm.
know where he still is.
Right. It doesn't sound horrible at all to me. I know exactly what you're talking about. And like I have somebody in my life now who is like a friend of a friend who keeps wanting to get closer to me, but I know what's happening with them
Mhm.
eating wise. Like it's like I see you.
Yeah.
You haven't said a word, but I know what's happening
Yeah.
and I don't want to get involved. And I know it sounds horrible because I would love to help if I could, but I know where they are and I don't want to entangle myself in it because I know it will be triggering and problematic for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there are people in my life that I could help. There are people that at different stages of their disease I think that I could involve myself with. But this person, like you're saying, it's just too deeply entranced in their own toxic behavior and language and thoughts around it
Yeah.
that I don't think I could be of help or of service right now. And like I do feel bad about it because I'm sure you also have friends that have died
Oh,
through this,
very many. Yeah.
and like I have friends that have died through anorexia and I wish that I could have helped them and their faces come to mind when I'm like, maybe you should help this person because you don't want them to die. But I also have to remind myself that like nobody could have helped me before I was ready.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't, I had to be ready, because like I was approached by people on the street, total strangers, you need to get help. You have an eating disorder, get help. You know what I mean? And that didn't make me pick up the phone and call someone.
No, that made you say, you know what? You don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, you don't fucking know me,
Mhm.
like you don't know shit, like I had a photographer. I was working in a gallery in New York for a little while and we hung a show and it was the photographer show and he came up to me And he said, I think I'd like to take your photograph, and, as a woman, you're instantly like, what? What do you mean? You know what I mean? I was like, oh no. He's like, no, like seriously, I don't think you know what you look like. I'd like to take your photograph so that you could see what you look like. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a photographer too. Okay. I was like, I could take my own photograph, and I was pissed. So deeply fucking pissed that he had the gall to say that to me. But you know what I did? I took my photograph like 6 months later, not right away, but finally I was like, you know what? I am going to take my photograph. And it did help me. Didn't change anything at the time, but it was one of the little steps that I was like, okay, that's what I look like. You know what I mean? And like, so I think you can help people in the small ways, but like you're saying, if it's going to hurt you, you have to protect yourself.
Yeah. And that's one of the first things you learn in a 12-step program. You kind of shed those that are bad for you, but you're also supposed to be of service. So there's this dichotomy, you're kind of torn.
Right.
And I'm always very torn. And I've many years between myself and that. And I respect the fact that my grasp on sobriety is always tenuous. I'm always at risk. I'm always a junkie. I will always be a junkie. That's never going to change. It's whether I choose to use that day or not. It's one day at a time. It is.
Yeah, totally.
And if I were to allow this person to come within these walls this day, it's a scary day at best. And I hit the family reset button. I have a 3-year-old at 45 years old, and there's no room for that in my life.
Totally. Yeah. You have a toddler.
I have a toddler. I do. It's great. Yeah. It's amazing. When I was a father the first time around, I was not equipped to be a dad at all. I can say that with a great degree of certainty, as much as that probably makes me look like a bad person. When my daughter came into the world, I was not prepared to be a father. I was 24. My daughter's 21. And I wasn't equipped. I wasn't ready. I did it. Yeah. I did what I had to do, but was I good at it? Probably not. Was I mean to her? Absolutely not. I love my daughter.
Yeah.
But I was emotionally crippled when I was that age. I really was.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine what parents go through, especially in addiction, and even post-addiction. Just like I'm sure it's such a hugely encompassing new project in and of itself to have to balance like staying sober and staying well on top of that. I'm sure is hard and difficult,
Now, not so much. Then, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Then, yes, definitely. Now, I mean, I'm I'm old, and that's I'm not, but I am. And in my head, like, what does that look like? Being gainfully employed, married, 3-year-old, slipping back into that. Number one, I can't hide it. Number two, I'm going to be doing it around a child. I already don't like that guy.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I'm like, fuck that guy.
For sure.
So I'm not going to be that guy.
Yeah. I think that was one of the hardest things for me was once my husband and I started dating again, he knew me pre-anorexia. And then we started dating a little bit, but I was going to Rome for a year for school. So I was very like, don't get attached. Okay. And he was like, I love you. I was like, no, be cool, so then I went to Rome. And when I came back is when the anorexia started. And so he was away for a little bit on tour. So when we finally got to see each other again, I was already sick. And there was no room in my life for a boyfriend by any means. Like my life had one clear goal, was to lose weight, and to have a man around, that's not going to work. You know what I mean? So, and to see my body like that whole, so I pushed him completely away. I don't want anything to do with you. Get the fuck away from me. Like very harshly and meanly because I was so scared, and he threatened the eating disorder. So he was a threat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was the last time. That was the last time we spoke until we started speaking again in 2007. That was 2003. So 4 years go by. In that time period, I've gotten well. I've gone to grad school. I'm pretty good. I'm okay. I wouldn't say like on the firmest ground that I'm on now, but I'm doing all right. And so when we start talking again, I think, oh fuck, I'm gonna have to like come clean to this dude about what that was all about and like apologize and like make amends basically because
Yeah.
like I was a shitty fucking person and like I made him feel like he was the problem when I was the problem, you know what I mean? And also like if this person wants to have a relationship with me, I have to tell them that I have an eating disorder because you have to eat with people all day every day.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so awful. So like I remember like having that conversation with him and him being like that makes a lot of fucking sense. Like, it's like I've been confused about this for years. Like I thought we were cool, you know what I mean? You were like always so sweet, and then suddenly you were just so mean. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I was awful. I'm sorry. And then as the fact that he didn't immediately reject me was like amazing to me because I thought I'm just damaged. Nobody's gonna want to be with sick fucking person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as we got closer and closer and closer, and I let him in more and more and more and revealed more and more of the secrets and the things I would do and the tricks as a way not only to let him in, but I think as a way to protect myself because I thought, well, if I tell him what specifically to look for, then I won't do it. Because you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if I tell him, here's how I used to hide food, here's how I used to make it look like I hadn't gained, like I would wear specific clothing to hide my body. You know what I mean?
I did this
And
with my wife too, with my tricks.
Yes, you know what I mean? And I think it keeps me honest because I'm not going to go back and do those things. It's pointless to do them because I know that he's watching. Even now, 16 years later, like out of the hospital, like we'll go out to eat and I can tell he's like, you're going to eat, right? And then like on tour, he's like, you're going to eat, right? I'm like, I'm going to eat. I'm going to eat. I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? And not in like a guard dog way, just in like I'm here to keep you honest, way.
If you're accountable to someone else, I think that helps.
Yes, I think so.
One can construe that as a codependency. I don't think so because I think if you're going to be married or in any sort of long-term relationship, you're accountable anyway.
Yeah, I think a marriage is different. You know what I mean? Like I am all about, and I say many times on my podcast, like you should get well and stay well for yourself because you can't be a good wife if you're sick. You can't be a good bandmate. You can't like there's this line where you have to be like, is this? But then I remember, like, no, I don't need Pat. I don't need my husband. I did it on my own. I did it without him. And I was well for many years without him. So like, I know that's not the reason, but is he tremendously helpful? Yes, of course. Tremendously helpful, and just to have, because even now I have to say, is this normal amount of food? You know what I mean? And he'll be like, I think he's very sneaky. He's always like, no, more. And like, I don't know if you're a Malcolm in the Middle fan.
Yes, I am.
But the episode where Hal, like, she gains weight. And so she wants to lose weight. And Hal, she's like, I don't know why I'm not losing weight. And Hal's like secretly replacing the like heavy cream with the low fat milk. I'm always like to Pat, like, you would fucking do this. And he's like, if I had to, like, if I had to.
I mean, that's what it's about too. You have to have somebody who's rigorously worried about your self-care, someone who's worried about whether you're okay or not. And my wife has no idea what I'm like when I'm in the throes of that. She's never seen me like that. I was clean far before she ever met me, but I let her know. I broke it down for her when we were first dating. Like, listen, this is who I was. I'm not going to hide this because it's going to come up. And she's actually not fully comfortable, I think, with the idea of rigorous honesty on my end because I don't care who I tell. Yeah, I'm a junkie.
Yeah.
I don't care. I will tell anyone that because as much as it may be embarrassing to someone who doesn't know what that world is, to me, that's not only a badge of honor, but sometimes it's like I'm throwing up a flag like, hey, you look like you've been there too. Like, you're not alone.
Right.
And
totally.
I think that's why my podcast turned out the way it did too. It wasn't my intention. I was just doing a music podcast on my wife's suggestion because we were hunkered down during COVID. She was
Yeah.
sick of me puttering around the house doing next to nothing, just playing with the baby in pajamas all day, every
Yeah.
day.
Find something to do.
Yeah. You were a journalist. Go do something with that. All right. I
Mhm.
guess I will. And, within the first two conversations, I went from, Lycia, who those Mike and Tara, they were never in that world. But my second
Mhm.
conversation was with Toby from Softkill. And it was like hit the ground running. Like he's
Yeah.
from where I'm from.
Right.
And it snowballed from there.
Mhm.
And I don't seek out people who had issues, but I think if you were a musician, 9 times out of 10, something's up.
Right. Something has come up for you in your life, or someone you're extremely close with, someone in your band. You know what I mean? Like, has come up for you for sure. And I think that the world of the musician, the life of the musician, is a fucking hard one, and like this, like I saw this meme the Hard Times put out the other day. It was like, oh, I'm sorry I asked about how much the gig pays. It's just that I'm not 12. You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, like that's still a fucking thing. Like in 2022, where we have to beg to get paid.
Yeah.
And where people are like, oh, well, people won't come if they have to pay. I'm like, well, I guess we won't have them come then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like promoters being like, oh, well, people would really prefer a free show. I'm like, well, I would prefer to get fucking paid for the work that I do,
Yeah.
and like, my podcast is on Spotify, so I can't hate on Spotify that much, but like, does Spotify fucking suck? Yeah, it
Yes.
does. Like,
I'm on Spotify too. And they suck.
It suck, y'all. It'd be great to get paid like appropriately for the work that you do. And it's tough because we have to balance this toxic idea about the artist, the suffering artist, and that's part of it.
Yeah.
And like I'm down to like, I don't need a lot, like I'm down to work hard, and like, like I don't expect like a bus or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, I'm down to tour in the van. I just want to get like paid the way I would if I was just working a job. Like, and so I think that all those pressures just add up and add up and add up, and people deal with them in different ways. And sometimes those ways are destructive.
And the thing is like it can fragment you, trying to make art and subsist as an adult. And I think if you make music already, there's something wrong. Because like,
yeah, wow.
Legitimately 13 years old, I'm in my first hardcore band, so that puts us in like 1988, 89. And everyone I played in bands with, a lot of them were straight edge, but the fact of the matter was we all came from very, very messed up homes and situations.
Right.
And you don't just go out there and try to make noise and try to get all of this heavy emotion off of your chest without having something maybe not broken, but that you need something fulfilled. So I think when I interview musicians, I already know going in that I'm talking to someone who has something maybe not missing, but something awry, something askew somewhere. And I can say that because I'm one of them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like I said, I wasn't a musician growing up. I was really active in the music scene in Philadelphia, and I don't think there was a lot of women. I could think of like one band I knew that had a woman in it, and of my era of Philadelphia, like punk and hardcore.
Who, an Albatross?
I think Eddie Gita DJ'd my wedding.
Yeah, Eddie Gita and I grew up together.
Yeah, sick.
Jay Hudock, the bass player, is my best friend in the world.
Sick.
Legitimately my best friend.
Nice. That's so sick. Yeah, and Albatross actually played Creepoid's last show as well, my old band Creepoid, which was really like made us feel like, wow, this like band that we thought was like legends, they're like opening our show. What? You know what I mean? Like we made it,
We're all massive Creepoid fans. We're all massive Creepoid fans. Just so you know.
Thank you. So like when Creepoid started, Pat needed a bass player. So at 29 years old, I start learning how to play the bass. But I knew that world of music for sure. And I also came to it, I think, prepared for the struggles of it by being an artist, of someone who, you know what I mean, has only ever wanted to be an artist, in kindergarten when they're like, dress up like what you want to be. You know what I mean? When day I like come in with like a beret and like paintbrushes in my pocket because I want to be an artist, you know, and
Yeah.
that's what artists look like. Yeah. And like I came to it understanding that world of like wanting to express yourself, like having this need to express something. And I think what made me comfortable in music and not like completely always dissatisfied was that it wasn't necessarily always like for other people like but really like about what I had to do like for me, like this incessant need to explore or express something inside me that's for me, you know. And
Yeah.
like it's sick when other people like it and get it, but like I think that that authenticity and just doing it for like I just can't not do it. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
Like
it's
has
who you are. It's who you've been. You
yeah.
just found a way to finally show everyone else this is who I've been.
Right. Yeah. And like, just like, I instantly loved performing. And like, performance has always been a part of my artwork. So to be able to do that with like a built in audience that claps, you know,
Yeah.
like in the art world, was just like, very nice. You know what I mean? I'm like, shit, people clap. What? This is
It's
rules.
so
You know?
banal just to be like inspected and like people holding up scorecards almost at that point, like it's a 7.
Yes. Different world for sure. You know, I always say going to art school was like every time you walked in the cafeteria and if like a table was flipped over and there was like trash, you were like, is this someone's work?
Is this an
Like,
installation or
is this a piece? You know what I mean? Like, you know, and I brought that energy into Creepoid and just like, you know, I am not the fucking best bass player in the world, but like I know how to perform, you know, and I think that I was valuable to my bandmates in that I was not afraid on stage. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like I felt powerful on stage and it was all tied up into my recovery too. Like I've mentioned of feeling like I had a physical body again, wanting to be able to perform, wanting to be able to do the thing I know I can do and I'm good at, but knowing I have to eat to do that.
yeah,
Like, you know what I mean? Like letting it be a little bargaining there of just being like, all right, you need to eat a lot and feel good and be ready to perform. And that was useful to me, you know, and like it brought me back into my body and being seen, you know what I mean? Being looked at by people was something I really hated in the beginning, post hospital, like early recovery. I hated to be looked at.
yeah.
And it performing on stage made it like something I actually liked again.
Wow. I've never actually put any thought into that because as far as I was concerned, I was always shy my whole life.
Mm,
Shy, like horribly shy,
yeah.
painfully so, except when there was either bass guitar or a microphone in my hand and I was on stage in
Hmm.
front of a bunch of crazy punk kids. And then
Yeah.
it was
Like action, baby.
yeah, yeah. I am Jim Morrison on Iggy Pop, on
Mhm.
Carl Buchner from Earth Crisis. Give me it all. I will be all of those things all at once. And especially with Starkweather in the Universe being my favorite band when I was a kid, a
Mhm.
Philadelphia band, like Rennie didn't even look at people. He would just go in
Yeah, yeah.
circles. Like I would feed into that. Like, wow, if he could do that, and he hates
Mhm.
every human being on planet Earth. I love Rennie to death, but he's a misanthrope. I could at least get beyond that and
Right,
slam into people and do backflips and shit. And
right.
I don't know if what it fed in me. I still don't know what it feeds in me. Still playing music, but I'm a shy person until I'm
Mhm.
performing. Then I'm not. I'm
Right.
not even Pete anymore. I'm some other being. I don't even know what his
Yeah,
name is because we're not intimately familiar with one another.
right. Only shows up limited, yeah.
Yeah,
Limited appearances. Yeah.
absolutely. I don't even know
Yeah.
who I am on here.
Yeah, I just really am thankful that my husband like saw that and believed in me so like thoroughly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I was like, I don't know. He's like, you can do it. You know? Like there was like no hesitation. He was like, you can do it. You can do it. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. Like really just because he believed in it so strongly that I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot, you know? And like being in a band is just the greatest fucking thing. Like, you know,
Yeah.
being in a band, I like that. I like having the camaraderie of your brothers, your sisters, your people, you know, and that like going on tour, like playing is music is fun and it's cool when people come to your shows, but like I love the like we figure shit out together now.
Yeah.
And like the thinking of a pack and how my bandmates took care of me on tour and didn't ask questions when I was like, we need to drive 20 miles out of the way to go to this Whole Foods, or we need to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we took care of each other. And like I learned so much about being a human being being in a band, you know, like that had nothing to do with like playing bass or like singing, you know,
Yeah.
like even though my bandmates did teach me how to play bass and to sing, you know, but beyond that, like showing up for one another and figuring things out and just like just always pushing forward, you know, like we never accepted defeat. Like we were always like, all right, fucking van broke down in the middle of the desert, no cell service, still got to make the show though. How are we going to get there? You know, like,
You know, and I think that's what people strive for and look for, their tribe. I think that's why
yeah.
young men join the military. I think that's why people join bands. I think that's why people join sports teams. You know, there's that need to be a part of a unit that has an achievable and single goal, whatever that goal may be. You could join a motorcycle gang. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Everybody's got that one thing they're all headed toward. And I think that kind of helps put you outside of your own head enough to empathize with your comrades. And I think that makes you well, maybe not if you're, you know, in an organized crime group, but with the exception thereof, I mean, it helps you become a more empathetic and a more well-rounded human being.
Totally. Yeah. I think I bring all of my recovery tools to being in a band. And like, I am a much more empathetic person than I was pre-anorexia, because I do realize you really don't know what people are going through, you know, like, and I try to remember that like people didn't know what I was going through and I was fucking pissed about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how can you not see, you know? Oh, I'm actively deceiving you. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Like, I forgot. I'm a bullshit artist.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot. I'm a liar. That's why. But you know what I mean? Just like bringing all of those tools and like being patient, trying to be patient and kind, and to not need to build up my ego through it. Like this, like I try to keep the band in its place in my heart and like what it does for me. Like I'm not good just because I'm in a band or because the band does X, Y, and Z. Those things are sick and fun and cool. But like I need to feel good about how I treat my bandmates. That's the sick thing. You know what I mean? It's not like what we do. It's like how we are is the thing. And I think people get caught up in this shit. Like, yeah, I want to get paid appropriately. I want to like, you know what I mean? But I don't need a bus. I don't need X, Y, and Z to make me feel like I've succeeded. And I think like that was a lesson I learned through being in a band for 10 years, was that success can look different to you. It doesn't have to look the way you thought it was going to look. Oh, I got to get on the Warped Tour. So, you know, like not that wouldn't have been sick. It would have been great. But like, just because I didn't get that doesn't mean I wasn't successful. And I think I was uniquely able to go into that and learn those lessons because of all the shit I learned through recovery. You know what I mean? It made them easier lessons to learn.
That's an incredible way to look at it, because my experience, by and large, with a very few exception, being in a band is very dysfunctional family unit, especially when it's just a few guys that grew up together. So there's going to be a lot of raw nerve going on.
Sure.
And, I think the only time where it went off completely without a hitch is when Jay Hudak from an Albatross and I and our late best friend Hans, we had a band together, and we didn't even write music per se. We just kind of went out and did very doom laden, brutal, kind of like stream of consciousness music. And we did this for a while, and we would play everywhere doing it. That was the only time I think where we were all of one mind and of one spirit. And the other time I find myself at cross purposes with people. And I think that's because men are competitive. But you know, my experiences with being in bands has always been a little tenuous.
Yeah, I feel that. You know, I definitely feel like super lucky and fortunate that like my bandmates were my people, you know, and like they like we fought all the time. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
You know, like physically fought all the time.
Yeah.
Like people would always be like, "Oh shit, Creepoid, are y'all gonna break up?" We'd be like, "Why?" Like your drummer just punched your guitarist in the face. So like, oh no, that just happens. Like we're very, but you know, we were very like, if we were upset, we told each other right away. There was no bullshit. There was no like, you know what I mean? Like it was like, oh, are you mad at me? Why? Okay, now I feel better. You know what I mean? Like, and yeah, I think that they didn't even like my bandmates didn't always know. I think people that listen to my podcast know more about my eating disorder than my bandmates. It's not like we've spent hours and hours talking about it, but when I said to them, I need this, they believe me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when I said I can't do that, like what certain things would come up that I couldn't do. You know what I mean? And like it happened sometimes there were things they couldn't do because it didn't work, you know, and I had to let that go and trust them too. If they were telling me it's a hard no, it's a hard no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think like
respecting that boundary is like kith and kin to a healthy friendship.
Absolutely. Yep.
So let me ask you this, because on my podcast, the first thing I always ask everyone, and I kind of have an idea of what yours would be, but what is it that existentially terrifies you on the deepest level of your being? Because I find that, once you know that about someone, you kind of know what makes them tick.
Like now,
like right now in life, what it's
in life, like at this time in my life,
yeah,
the scariest thing I could imagine.
Yeah.
Oh, what a toughie. I guess the scariest thing I could imagine would be my like having my ability to express myself be taken away. You know, like having to not be able to have an outlet in which I could write, read, make art, make photographs, make music with my friends. Like that would be the scariest thing I could imagine, because I can't imagine living, like I have made specific choices in my life to allow that to happen every day. You know what I mean? Sometimes I get down on myself, like I don't fucking own a house. I'm going to be 40 this year. I don't own shit. I don't have anything to show for my life. But then I remember like the records that I've made and the artwork I've made and the shit that is very important to me to express myself. And I know that I've made all those choices to enable that to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think like it would be unbearable if I couldn't do that.
Right.
You know?
I think that that's kind of a common thread. I've heard variations of that many times. It's kind of like losing the ability to see, hear, think.
Yes.
It all kind of falls in line.
That's how I see, hear, and think. You know?
Yeah, exactly. This is how I breathe. Making this music, making this artwork. At least it's not as obtuse as the way my mind works. You're so fortunate in that.
What do you mean?
Oh boy. I've talked about this on my podcast before, but I've had the same existential dread since I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and it's something that makes no sense to most people, but I would always ruminate on the idea that outside of the known universe, when all of the stars have been surpassed, there is nothing. There's nothing. And
that doesn't bother me.
That well, let me tell you something. I've white knuckled through many panic attacks thinking about that from age 5 or 6 until like 3 nights ago.
Yeah.
I get into this loop, and it's like, okay, no, there's going to be nothing. You're going to run into the void. There's going to be nothing. There's going to be nothing. My heart starts going. I start hearing my heartbeat in my ears, and I clamp down, and then the panic attack ensues. And that kind of like that can happen when I'm driving. I don't like out of nowhere. I don't know why I even think of it. I don't know why that would worry me. I'm never going to know that. I'll never know that. I have no need to have that information. What's out there? Who cares?
Right. Yeah, who cares?
But
we're alive right now.
Yeah. But it's something that I return to when I allow my thoughts to, kind of drift. There's something about the idea that there is a vacuum, there's a nothingness that just frightens me to no end.
And you said that's something that's been going on
Since I was like
like
4 or
since
5.
you were, yes, yeah. Did you ever talk to people about that, like as a
Yeah.
as a kid?
Yeah.
What was that reaction?
Mostly like, fuck, why would you,
Yeah,
why is that even a worry? What's got you thinking about that? And
yeah.
it was my, there was a television show on public television when I was a child called Nova, and it was all about the
Mhm.
universe and all of
Yeah,
that.
okay, I remember that.
And I would just fixate on this. And eventually it got down to, the Big Bang Theory and the way the universe expanded. But eventually there's just a vacuum of black nothing.
Mhm,
And that was it. That just
mhm.
triggered something in me that existentially never went away.
Right, and that became intolerable,
That be
that
that be
feeling.
the vacuum became intolerable. Like
Mhm,
absolute, like oblivion became an intolerable thought to me. So I've
mhm,
been trying to make sense of it since I was a little kid, and I never will.
mhm, yeah, yeah, I used to worry a lot as a kid too about, like, senseless things, like, I would worry, like, the house is gonna burn down, we're not gonna have a place to sleep, or, when you were a kid and you would get those things in the mail that were, like, kids' faces and be like, "Have you
Yeah,
seen them?" I
yeah,
would worry about them,
me
I'd be like,
too.
"Where are they?"
I
And I would, like, look for them, you know what I mean? Like,
there was an old man that lived in a really rundown house by my bus stop when I was a kid, and every time I would see him, I would cry because I knew
oh,
his wife was dead. I knew he lived alone, and it fucked me up. Oh, did that
yeah.
fuck me up? I didn't know much about him. My dad did. My dad used to drink with him in the bar every other night. I didn't know that. I didn't realize he had friends, but I just saw a lonely old man walking with 3 groceries in a bag every day into this red rundown brick home. Oh my God. Like this is, I'm a ruminator apparently. I that's
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
But
I would
I think, like,
see this shit. It
it
fucked me up.
it speaks to, like, I'm not I think we're, like, are you a millennial?
Uh
If you're
no, I'm Gen X.
Gen X. So we're close though, because I'm like a cusper because I
Yeah.
was born in 82.
Yeah.
So, like, there's definitely like this, I think, like, so what? Why are you upset about that kind of situation, like, vibe that I would get as a kid too?
Yeah.
And, like, I remember one time not being able to sleep and, like, creeping down the stairs, and my mom's watching like 2020 or something, and this guy had a schizophrenia, and he simulated the voices that he heard on, like, a cassette tape, and, like, they played it, and that, like, fucked me up. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I was like, Sarah, like, very scary as a kid. I was like 8 or something. And I said to my mom, is that going to happen to me? Like, am I going to get schizophrenia? And bless her heart, my mom's like in her late 20s, probably. She's a kid too, kind of,
Yeah.
well, way younger than I am at this point, with a kid who's like thoughtful and inquisitive and asking this deep, dark question. And she's like, well, I don't know. I can't say one way or the other if that's going to happen.
Wow.
Yeah. She was like, I don't know. I don't know if that'll help. You know what I mean? Like, and I just thought, okay.
Lucky,
You know what I mean? Like, she was truthful.
lucky
She told
you.
the truth.
But if you process that and you were okay with that, lucky you, because when I was same age, about 5, 6, somewhere in there, I grew up going into the woods with my father because we're fucking hillbillies. And where my family's cabin was, there were lots of cows. They were beef cows, cattle, but the guy who
Mhm.
owned them didn't really slaughter them. And they were all behind their barbed wire fence. And I looked at my father, and I'm not making this up because he'd recounted this to me millions of times. I said, Dad, what if to them we're the ones who are fenced in? I was like 4 or 5, and he looked
Yeah.
he looked at me and he said,
He's like, never say that
no,
again.
he looked at me and he said, you're probably fucking right. And he picked me up and he kissed me. So I think what that comes down, where he could have just said, you know what, don't think that,
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah. Don't
fenced
think that.
in. This is your place. That's their place. Instead, he was like, he fostered, I guess, this you know, ability to meander and to
Mhm.
go deeper than maybe I should, but God bless him for that, because I made me a creative.
Yeah. And, like, my mom always admits very like, she's like, you were my oldest. I made all my mistakes on you.
Me too. I'm the oldest.
She's like, yeah, she's like, should I have told you as an 8-year-old that she couldn't say one way or the other if I would get schizophrenia. She's like, no, I wouldn't have done that to Mikey, who was her youngest, who was born 14 years after me.
Yeah.
Right. So she learned a lot in that time period where she'd be like, no, that's not going to happen to you. What are you, crazy? Like, but for me, she was like, well, I don't know, one way. And I appreciate the very blunt, direct honesty. Like, but, like as a kid, I remember thinking like, mom isn't somebody I go to for comfort. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that she did that to protect me. She was a teacher her whole career. She taught for 30 plus years, so I think that her experience with parents that would helicopter and like overprotect and their kid could do no wrong, she didn't want to do that. She wanted me to be independent and stand on my own, and that's great. That's a great impulse. But I think she took it so far that I thought I can't express worry around my mom because she doesn't seem to like it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like she's like, it's okay to think about that, but I don't think that's going to happen to you or whatever. It was just like, I don't know what you want from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I'd be like, okay, so where does the worry go? You know what I mean? Because I'm still going to worry, but now I don't feel super great about talking to my parents about it. It feels wrong somehow. You know what I mean? And like, my parents, again, were kids, like, like they were kids when they had us. So like they would fuck with us. Like we were chilled, like we were all the same age sometimes, I think. Like, my brother would get so nervous on driving in the car, and he would say, are we lost? Are we lost, Dad? Are we lost? And my dad would go, we're lost. I don't know where we are. You know what I mean? They would like fuck with us. And I think, they're just 20-year-olds trying to have fun with their kids. And we're like, we're lost. Like, God. And I think like it just, you know what I mean? It just made it seem like, don't worry. Don't bring it up. They don't like that. They don't want you to feel that way. You know what I mean? Like, so where does it go? It goes inside. Yeah. Like the worrying never stops, but it just builds up and builds up and builds up. And I think that finally erupted into like, I'm worried about what life's going to look like as an adult. And I don't know what it's going to look like. You know what I mean? And that was how it all, like, I couldn't say to my mom, I'm worried about what life's going to be like after college. What's that going to look like? You know what I mean? Like, because I've always been like relying on this academic world to feel like that's the next step. The next step is this, and now I don't have that. And I want to be an artist. And I don't know how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and there were no other artists in my family that I could look at and be like, okay, they're surviving. You know what I mean? Everyone had jobs, like stable, normal jobs. Like, so I didn't know like what's going to happen to me. And I didn't know how to deal with it, like, so that's how that ended up like, for better or for worse with me, and like, it would have been cool if someone had just been like, it's cool to talk about that shit. Like, it's all good,
That was, I guess that's the one thing I had going for me, that my parents were
the one thing. I'm sure you have more than one.
Well, I mean,
the one.
I don't want to piss all over my dad's grave, but he was a very dysfunctional person.
Yeah.
But he was a free thinker at the very least, and a musician.
Right.
So I had that with him, but he was also very rigorous with, I don't want to say he was homophobic, but he was very homophobic. Mm-hmm. And he was convinced I was a homosexual when I was very young. So he did his damnedest to straighten me out. Mm-hmm. So my next to youngest sibling, my brother Gavin, who is a gay man, was kind of like my father's comeuppance, and it taught him a lot about being a father, because like when someone's really like, I think people are born gay. That's my opinion. But my brother it was obvious when he was 5, he was 4, that he was a gay man. And I was his protector. I'm the oldest. And I would fight with my father quite a bit about him. And eventually, as my brother got older and my father got older, that was his comeuppance. That's when he realized, okay, this doesn't really matter.
Right.
This isn't really a thing that anyone should be worried about.
That I need to be, concerned about.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my mom always says that. Like, we learn it as we go.
Mhm.
We learn it as we go. And I've that's why I have a lot of empathy, and it's never like a blame, like parents fucked me up. They were doing their best. Like,
Yeah.
they did fuck me up, but they didn't mean to. You know what I mean? And like, I fucked myself up because I took it and ran with it as well. You know what I mean? And like, so there's like we're bringing it to back. There's like a million reasons why we come out the way we do and why we choose to go down these paths of destructive behaviors.
Yeah.
And we can't disown, like, yeah, like you were part of that.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't not it. Like, that I wasn't not part of it, but it's also like a million other fucking things. And I think like whatever, there's like this human need to understand.
Yeah.
On the hierarchy of needs, right? That's something we need to understand. But with addiction, sometimes I think that fucks us up because there is this, I want to know why. I need to know why. Why me? Why did I start starving myself? And yeah, I've spent like years and years and years in therapy finding all these little tidbits, like, oh, this was part of it. This was part of it. But like, ultimately, it doesn't fucking matter if I know why or not.
No.
I just need to not starve myself.
You just need to know how to not do it.
Right.
Like,
give me the tools to not do it.
It's just like being schizophrenic. It's just like having chronic, depression or cyclical depression or whatever your psychological malady is. All of us have psychological maladies. All of us have problems. And my head full of bad wiring happens to include a predilection toward addiction. Thusly, I need to curtail any behaviors that would feed that addiction. Does some of it come from my parents? Yes. Does some of it come from genetics? Yes. I don't really need to know why anymore. That's so low on my list of needs. I just need to know how to not fall into my own trap.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I'll set it every time.
Yeah. I'm so good at it.
Yeah.
Stick your arm in the oh no, that burns. Don't do that again. Oh wait, I'm gonna do that again. Yeah. Oh, it burns. I'm gonna do it again. Oh shit. There. That's what it comes down to, really. For
sure. And I think like for me, there was this badge of honor about being able to tolerate it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a very Philly thing of like, being able to handle misery and that being something we're proud of. I think is like fucked up, I'm like, no, actually, I don't need that to feed my ego. Like how much shit I can take and still function.
That's not just Philly. I think that's intrinsically Pennsylvania because
I believe it. Yeah.
We are all gluttons for our own self-punishment.
Absolutely.
That's why the area that Ed Gita and Jay Hudak and I grew up in, there's a bar on every block and a church on every block, but that's about it.
Right. That's all. Yeah, that's what you need.
You can go and destroy yourself and then go and beg for forgiveness and then start over on Monday.
Yep.
And I outdrank you. I drank you under the table. Oh yeah, I did more dope than you last night. Oh yeah, you passed out, but I got back up and I did a line of coke and then we were good again. And there's how that can possibly be construed as a badge of honor is completely beyond me, but I was a part of it.
Yeah, it made sense at the time.
Sure.
Because at the time it made sense.
It made life easier to tolerate, especially when you're considering the fact that I'm worried about being in oblivion.
The nothing. Well, I feel like that's a good place to stop.
Yes.
I like to end on a happy note.
The happy note is we're all better now.
Yeah. Yeah, I always tell, like I've recently written, well, not recently, I've recently finished writing a memoir about my eating disorder. And it comes up a lot as a point of contention with my husband, who I really want to read it. And he's reluctant to read it because he makes the analogy of like, would you want to go watch me get beat up? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to read about your worst time, But I'm always like, but the end, it's great. It all worked out.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's a happy ending. The ending was I got better and like I figured out a way to stay well for 16 years now, you know, and like like you're saying, every day it's an everyday choice, but I feel good. I feel like I found my way out of that darkness. And like I even though I know it could go back at any time, I also know that I think about it as the past, you know, and I don't think about it as who I am now because I make it so important to make choices every day that keep me well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel the same exact way.
Yes.
It's just,
yeah.
I know people don't like me talking. Some people don't like me talking about it, but this is how I got here. And had I not gone through it, maybe I'd be not as good of a father. I don't know.
For sure. Yeah. Have you seen the meme where it's like the kid at the party and he's like, nobody knows I'm a this?
Yeah.
And that's like the meme. So I always think it's like, nobody knows I'm a recovered anorexic. And then someone else at the party is like, yeah, we all do know. You talk about it nonstop. Bitch, you never shut up about it. I'm like, yes, I did. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having
exciting.
me. This is great.
Absolutely. It was really, really great. I can't wait to share this with the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's it, folks. That was Anna Troxell and myself on a co-production of the Convalescent Flaneur and the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I just want everyone to know out there that, you know, if you do have some sort of problem, no matter what that problem may look like, no matter what it is you're going through at this point in time, you're not alone. There are people just like you going through exactly the same thing. And I know what we talked about on here may sound, you know, a little altruistic because it's in retrospect and we're on the other side of things, but I believe we're both cognizant of the fact that there are people who are in it right now who haven't come to terms with it yet, who you know, just don't want to face up to it. When you're ready, I'm not trying to force anyone here, but when you are ready, it's not hopeless, and there is life on the other side. So I need to get back to my son because I'm still standing in my kitchen. I'm still watching him. It's still it's still daddy time. I'm just kind of stealing a few minutes here. So from all of us at 3:33 a.m. Studios, from Convalescent Flaneur podcast, she's been Anna. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. Good night, everybody.